Hey, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bridget, and in this video, I'm going to teach you how I made my painting, Twilight. As you can see, I am painting from a reference photo which I took when I was at my fiance's cottage on a lake in Ontario. Oil paint starts out thick, so I mix in a fair bit of oil while it's still on the palette, so it loosens up the color and it becomes easier to blend. I use a larger brush for larger areas and a smaller brush for smaller areas and details. To start this painting, as with all oil paintings I do, I begin with the background, that is, anything furthest away from the viewer. In this case, it's the sky, and in most cases, it's the sky. I create a gradient, that is, when one color transitions into another color, by using horizontal brush strokes. Keeping my brush moving in the same direction and not flipping it or turning it, I move my brush on the line between the two colors and slightly move it up and down as I move the brush side to side. Once I'm happy with my gradient, I then paint the clouds on top. With clouds, I try to keep the texture of the paint to give the illusion of depth, so I place the paint on a little bit thicker, and that way you can see the shape of the cloud more easily and it gives it the appearance that it is real. So I start with my brightest and my darkest colors, and then I take a fluffy brush to blend it all out. I think clouds look really cool when they have high contrast, that is, when you have a really bright color next to a really dark color. First, I begin with some white, and I'm using a small brush to do this. For the gradient, I used a much bigger brush, but for smaller details, I use a smaller brush. So I'm starting off with some white, and then I'm going right in with the darkest color. And I just sort of experiment with brush sizes and brush shapes to try to get the texture and the effect that I want. I use a really small, thin brush to create the smaller and more distant clouds. I find that with a small brush, I have a lot more control than I do with a bigger brush. So as you can see, I am painting from a reference photo on my computer. What you'll notice about screens is that they will distort the color than what your natural eye sees. You may have noticed that when you take photos of a sunset or photos of anything really, but particularly sunsets, you'll notice that your camera doesn't quite capture how beautiful that sunset truly is. And that's because cameras distort colors. They don't have as many color receptors as our eyeballs do. So in a similar way, a screen will distort your colors too because it's based off of the photograph. What's nice about painting is that you can play with the colors and you can try to capture the colors a lot better than what your camera can capture. So I'm beginning at the top of my painting and working my way down. This also happens to just be where the background is versus the foreground. So that's often how I work in a painting. I start with the background and move my way forward, and I start at the top and move my way down. And that way I'm creating layers and I don't have to go back to previous layers as often to try to fix anything. Before I move on to a layer, I make sure that I'm completely happy with my first layer. So next I add the tree line with a small brush and some dark green. Since these trees are far away, I'm not being too detailed with them to mimic the natural eye's experience when things are farther away. Things up close are more detailed and things further back lose detail, just as it is when we see things in real life. Because when things are farther away, we can't see the details as much. I'm mimicking what the natural eye would see. When I'm happy with the tree line, I move down to the water and I use the same gradient techniques that I used to make the sky. All the colors I'm using I have pre-mixed on my palette. For the purples, I have mixed titanium white, magenta, and phthalo blue. I've used a little bit of the magenta and the blue, and I've used a lot of the white to create these nice pastel colors for both the sky and for the water. And again, I'm using that back and forth, up and down motion that I used for the gradient in the sky. Once I'm done the gradient, I make the moon's reflection, trying my best to mimic the texture of water that I see in the photograph. For the moon and its reflection, I'm using titanium white straight from the tube, And as I apply it, it will mix with the color that is already on the canvas, so I don't have to worry about pre-mixing this color. I actually want it to stay relatively bright, so that way it will have good contrast, and that way it'll catch the eye's attention when people look at the painting. I'm using a very fine, very pointed, detailed brush to do these. That way I have better control over my paint and over the shape that they make. And finally, I add some shadow by the tree lines to make it look more natural. And I give the trees some texture as well. Once I'm done the water, I go back and I add in any final details that I would like that I wasn't able to do before I added the water. Remember, I am adding the details last, and that way I don't have to go back in and change them and keep changing them as I change other parts of the painting. This painting is based off of a photograph that I took when I was at my fiance's cottage, and it was just such a beautiful night. It was really cool because the moon came out over the tree line, but it was still a bright early evening with these stunning pastel colors. And right below the moon were these beautiful, picturesque, almost cartoon-like clouds. It was so stunning. I took as many photos as I could, and this is the second painting I've done based on this moment. I really wanted to capture and recreate the experience of being there. This painting and many more are for sale on my Etsy shop, or you can reach out to me directly if you are interested in purchasing one of these. If you like this video, give it a like, comment telling us about your favorite sunset that you've seen, and subscribe to my channel. It's free if you want to know when I next post a video. I have a plan to post more regularly and consistently, so let me know what videos you want to see next. Thanks for watching!